Reasonable Doubt is a group exhibition that looks at the raw reality and tangible effects of technical systems and the justice or injustice inherent in social systems. The group exhibition Reasonable Doubt questions the inherent degree of justice of social structures, out of an urgent awareness of the consequences and shortcomings implicit in the term equality. It offers a critical reading of the foundations on which our society is organised, both socially and infrastructurally, and shows how a number of fundamental ideas have their biased effects. It addresses the day-to-day outcomes of concepts such as equality and neutrality within systems of justice, technology, and access to public space and facilities. The exhibition focuses on a number of excesses that play an active role in all parts of society: political scandals, educational assessment mechanisms, and technical systems, whose inbuilt prejudices lead to horrific consequences. It looks at the contrast between the truth that algorithms purport to facilitate and the often problematic outcomes of their predictions. The foreground of progress veils the inherently biased rationale at these activities' core, while intrinsic advantages and disadvantages determine the eventual consequences. It is essential to know for whom and by whom technical systems are developed. If they eventually produce what they were designed for, the effects of their bias will have programmed negative effects on those who were not taken into consideration during the design process. In Reasonable Doubt, links are drawn or redrawn between these motives and elaborations. Technology, in the broadest sense, is literally a means that is observed and examined as a way of scrutinizing designed social structures and facilitating technologies. The contributing artists look critically at the architecture and digital infrastructure used to observe, control, and facilitate contemporary existence. On the one hand, the exhibition looks at these systems' raw reality and tangible effectuation, and on the other hand, it provides space for subversive adaptations of these technologies and devotes attention to other perspectives and possibilities in a critical, productive way, all considered with reasonable doubt.
Hello, welcome to this conversation in the series Every Difference is Created. This one is with Robert Glas, who's here and part of the exhibition Reasonable Doubt at V2. And we will have a conversation with him on his contribution to the exhibition and, of course, also his broader practice. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And
of course, yeah.
Maybe just to quick start, would you like to introduce the work yourself?
Yeah, I could do that. Let's go. So the contribution to this exhibition is an installation, and I think the main part of the installation is a film. And the project is entitled Absence of All Guilt. It's a film dealing with a predictive algorithm used by the Dutch probation service. Basically, they're using statistics to predict the likelihood that a person will offend or re-offend after a first suspicion or having done their time, basically. And I think what the film is trying to do is figuring out how this way of thinking about human behavior as a sort of a statistically predictable thing, how that relates to a completely different view of human behavior, and that is the way we look at it in court, in which, like following a liberal tradition, a human being is somebody who is a sort of an individual which makes in moments choices out of free will, etc., which is basically philosophically, in a way, well, there's a lot of debate about that, but you could say that it's sort of the opposite of statistically predictable behavior. And the film, the film exists completely out of a lawyer who's trying to exonerate her client on the basis of the fact that basically that the thing that he committed, that it was predicted. So the whole logic of the film is, if behavior is indeed predictable, then you cannot be guilty of the same behavior. And it's also sort of using very old case law from 1915, in which the Dutch Hoge Raad, I'm not sure how to, but it's sort of the highest judicial, verdicted that no one can be found, no one can be basically punished if there's no literal, if there's no such thing as guilt within the crime. And that, there it becomes really sort of debatable, and it's, I think that's what the film does, yeah.
Okay. And the film is part of an installation, but then maybe it's also good to say that the film is scripted.
Yeah, the film is definitely scripted. Yeah. There's, So I created so the film is it's a lawyer who is basically doing the last practice of what she's going to say in court with a client. But it's two actors, and the script was written together with Johannes Bijlsma, who is a professor in law at the University of Utrecht, who is also interested in the case. So it's sort of a sound thing you could try for real in a Dutch court.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it would work, but you could
try
go for this strategy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe something interesting as part of the elaboration of the project.
Yeah, so it's at one hand it's basically it's fictional, so but it's really fiction trying to figure out something that could happen on short notice. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. And the other part of the installation.
Yeah. So a part of the algorithm, it's not even AI. It's a very basic statistical algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that is used to predict the likelihood that somebody will commit a crime is something they call the rate of neighborhood deprivation. So how deprived the neighborhood is where you live in. This is not my language, but of course of the person who. Of the institution who created the algorithm, and part of the installation is basically all postcode areas of the Netherlands, together with all the data which is provided by the CBS used by the algorithm, which is data on how many men, women live in this neighborhood, what is their income, their median income. How many people are divorced? That kind of data, and then on the end, together with somebody with a professor in statistics, we sort of made the same calculation in order to get all the ratings of all the postcode areas of the Netherlands, like how depraved all postcode areas actually are according to the Dutch Deprivation service. Yeah.
Cool.
I live in a rather deprived neighborhood, according to. Yeah.
Of course. Or of course, but I mean, like, it's not your choice in the sense that you didn't come up with the algorithm.
No. It's just.
It's just what happens, and then
this
you
is
end
what
up
is
there,
used.
and then you're there, and then you have your chances of being held accountable are bigger.
So accountability is another thing, but where this algorithm plays a crucial role is, for instance, so you're arrested for something, you haven't been to court yet to figure out, like, the process of are you guilty or not is not it didn't yet started, but can you wait your trial in freedom or locked up?
Okay.
That's a decision that always has to be made, and then this algorithm is used to write a report which is affecting that. So if a couple of those things are more negative, then the chance that you will await your trial detained are higher. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which is lovely.
Which is insane.
Yeah. Exactly.
One of the elements in the you're with the work you're making, this secret or not easy to show system visible but you also create a possibility to disrupt it in a way. Is that intentional or is that?
Yeah, if I can disrupt? No, but I think that the disruption is already in there. It's basically two parts of a bigger system sort of colliding head on. But it's not, it's just when you look at it very theoretically, it's very problematic. But from day to day, these reports are used and then judges look at it and use it. While on a sort of I think on a, if you look at it directly, it's these ways of thinking about a human being are very much mutually exclusive, but in daily life they just, they coexist, I'm not sure if this is a good, So it's not my disruption.
No,
disruption is
but
already there. Yeah.
But I'm thinking just by addressing or making this system visible via both the installation as the film, where all of the elements, you're potentially giving us tools to also disrupt it. That's.
Yeah, I'm not just. Maybe. Yeah, I think, like. For me what was interesting making the film, because it took me quite a while to make it, I think a year and a half, is that I really started with at first I was, and I still am, but I was especially very critical of these systems, and of course, so I'm talking about this algorithm, and of course how racist and sexist and everything it is, because that's exactly what it is. And then I was thinking, let's attack this basically with all these high ideals we have, and we hold so high in court, like responsibility for actions and etc. etc. Already I had an intuition that they didn't coexist quite too good. But I think making the film, this shifted, and I think it's more towards the end. It was more like this algorithm used by the probation service, basically sort of almost disrupting and demolishing all these ideals in which are so sort of held high in court. Yeah. Because I think, like, when you really think, like. Whether a probation service can use it on an individual level, that's a whole different question. But I think it makes more sense that the likelihood that you will commit a crime is higher when there's a lot of things in life that do not which influence you in a negative way. I think that makes more sense actually than the idea of free will and accountability. But this is really sort of the arc I made during making the film, and I think the film is open enough to just. I think it doesn't judge in that sense, like this is bad or that is the other. It's just showing that two are very are not do not go well together.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did you?
If this makes sense at all. Yeah.
I think what you're saying is what they did or what they're doing, not so much. But how did you stumble upon it, or stumble? Like, how did you end up at this subject or this topic? Because it's something most people don't know.
Yeah.
And of course, like, it's quasi accessible, as in like the form, for example.
Yeah.
But then the subject matter in general.
Yeah, it's accessible, but you have to. It takes you a long time to really find it. Even though when I knew that it was there, it's. Yeah. I think for me, at a certain point, I was really interested in predictive policing, and there's much more, especially in I think in the United States, there's a very sort of open critique on what predictive policing is. So that's basically also the prediction of behavior, but then by the police force, trying to figure out which individuals need more surveillance attention. Yeah, exactly. With the and I was interested in that, and then I also figured out that such systems are used in the Netherlands. But then working on the sort of the narrative, I came to the conclusion that in order to make this contrast with what we talked about before, like the liberal ideals of personal accountability, etc., and that these systems should also be pointed, sort of geared towards specific individuals. And as far as I know, predictive policing systems are used in the Netherlands, but not geared towards individuals. It's always on a sort of, it's more about which neighborhoods to patrol. And then sort of reading on that, I stumbled upon these predictive algorithms used by the probation services, and they are actually looking at individual cases. So it was more, I think it made that was exactly what I was looking for. But used on a slightly different part of the justice system.
And your choice for making or translating, translating the knowledge in, like, let's say the installation, but like let's focus on the film for this sense. Like the consideration to make a film about it. Where did that come from?
I think at a certain point I was just always thinking about, I think often there's something weird with making films, is that it's such a long, it's for me it's quite a long process to make them, and then when you think about the next thing you're going to do, you're still in that mind. I think it naturally became a film. Tricky question, but I think I'm sort of at the point where I mainly make films. And I'm not sure why. I think the sort of the narrative. Always much more in narrative than, for instance, sort of a sculptural quality or something. And then film is very sort of apt to that way of thinking and presenting research and etc.
Exactly, because it's like a complex question.
It needs a bit of time. So then a time-based medium is already
Okay, so it kind of needs a conversation about the subject matter to give certain insights and
also because it's such a specific and unknown thing, you need quite a bit of context before you can even sort of and that's always a very tricky thing.
It's either
like
essay before you see the work or whatever.
You don't want that.
Okay. And you're also doing, or not you're also, but it's kind of part of a long-term research, I think, which also involves the jail system in the Netherlands and abolitionist movement in the Netherlands and these things.
I think it's really caused by this film that I was first interested in these predictive algorithms, which drew me a little bit into the justice system, and then basically working on this film and what we just talked about, I saw how all these sort of these ideals of forgiveness and punishment, and then you are redeemed, and it's all those things that Hannah Arendt also writes about. And it's like, for me, making
very biblical the way you say it.
Right? It is also very biblical, but it's even there's also a lot to be found about it in Hannah Arendt. But it really fell apart for me, and that opened up a sort of a whole new sphere of research. And then at a certain point, I stumbled upon the fact that this way of thinking, this very critical way of thinking about the justice system as a whole, which I was sort of slightly familiar with, but that it was so dominant in the Netherlands a few decades ago, and that opened up. So this is sort of how one project grows out of the previous.
But that like dominant, let's call it dominant discourse regarding the justice system. Could you tell something more about that? Because
as a whole, I'm really not an expert.
It's almost like a historical elaboration, but because you're doing the research on Luc Wilsman, I think.
Yeah,
and
so
working with
there's
this
like
archive?
there's a couple of people who are very influential in the sort of the post World War way of thinking about the post Second World War way of thinking about the criminal justice. But I think what happened in the Second World War is that not only now, but also back then, being imprisoned is also really a class thing, and people and studying law, especially back then, is also really a class thing. So people who ended up working in the criminal justice system did not have almost no family, who were detained ones, were imprisoned ones, etc., etc. But what the Second World War did is that that people working for the resistance or for other reasons were actually imprisoned as young men, mostly 19, 20, 21, and then started studying law. And Luc Hulsman is one of these people. He was imprisoned in Kamp Amersfoort for a while, but there's also Herman Bianchi, who was a very influential professor at the VU in Amsterdam. I think, yeah, so they brought their experience of being imprisoned with them and started to work in the criminal justice system and became very vocal about how violent a thing it is to lock a human being up, and etc., etc. And they were very influential too. And then this changed a lot, yeah, after the Second World War. But this is only the beginning of there's a lot to tell about it. Yeah.
Okay.
But I won't, yeah.
Because from what I understood, it was basically that because, let's say before the Second World War, like not a lot of people from, let's say the upper classes who would be able to study law and then started to work in the justice system, they basically never saw a prison from the inside because of a lot of reasons. And then it happened during the Second World War, and then after, they basically had a lot of influence of actually being against captivation or like against detaining people.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of professors very influential in the Netherlands who made this arc and first started to criticize the system a little bit and became more and more critical towards calling themselves abolitionists, like halfway the 80s. So it's a long sort of arc and journey. Yeah, but then the 80s happened themselves, and we had Lubbers 1 and 2 with the VVD and CDA, so everything sort of basically changed back while they sort of finally figured out that we should get rid of all prisons. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they started building again and starting to make laws that were kind of keeping people inside for longer time.
There's the it's a complex history, but one of the things that happened is that first sentences became a little bit higher towards the end of the 70s. So, and then of course prisons became fuller and fuller, and at a certain point there were too little cells to keep people in, and that was sort of publicly seen as evidence of rising crime rates. And then there was a public demand on more for stricter policy and stricter laws, and so that's a sort of a
spiraling up or down
depending on your definitely.
And then those ethical questions and the philosophical questions around prisons are something you're working on in that sense.
Indeed, yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, I am. I'm looking at one thing. I'm looking at the book that Luc Hulsman, who was a professor here in Rotterdam at Erasmus University, wrote in the same, basically published in the same year that he retired in '86. And I'm looking at his archive of his photographic archive. Not sure where to go with that yet, but it's sort of an ongoing thing. Yeah.
One thing I'm still interested in
Yeah.
pulling it back to the installation is how, because the audience themselves can look up their area code, of course.
Mhm.
That's part of the sculptural element of the work. Did you have hear reactions from the audience? You've presented it before in the Rijks Open already, because I can imagine like really black and white. You could see, like, if you're living in a good neighborhood, of course, that you could get away with a little more, or in the...
You can be rather confrontational in a way.
Yeah.
Were people confronted?
I'm not sure if people were confronted, not too openly, but I'm also not standing next to my work all the time. Yeah, but I think sometimes people are surprised or not so much. Like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, because it's if you see the kind of data is used, well, you most of the time you have a sort of an idea of, for instance, I think that the gemiddelde, how do you say that? Sort of
Average.
The average, of course, yeah. So your average income plays a lot, plays a big role in it. So you know what sort, when the average income of your neighborhood is a little bit higher or lower. Yeah. So it's, I'm not sure if people are that surprised.
And it's of course not that one-on-one that you'll find your get out of jail free card in the postcodes.
No, almost.
Not at all. No.
But it feels like it almost.
It feels, but it's such a sort of. Then you really have to. It's just a small part of an algorithm, which is a small part of making a report, which is a small part of a judge making a. So it's there's a lot of steps to be taken, but still there is influence. And for me, I think the reason to sort of include it in the work is, one is I think that the criminal justice system is something that that a lot of people are never in touch with. So it's easy to see it as something that is like far away from you. And this actually shows that everyone is included in some way. And it also makes very clear that that even though it is a sort of a small percentage of a percentage, if your neighbors decide to divorce, then the chance that you are committing a crime is somewhat higher according to the system. And if you make that arc, then you see how sort of surreal it is.
No, it's quite a, in that sense, confrontational work in a way, and also looking. Sometimes even at like the median incomes, the median incomes of certain neighborhoods, which was quite shocking. But then also because I was looking up for like the ones that have like a 10, or like the highest numbers basically, and which is some neighborhoods like around the city, of course, and they look at actually what's happening there, and it's quite shocking in the sense that. What the situation is in a way, because that's basically what you say. Like you're not really confronted with it so much. Also, like criminal justice system is something you want to keep away from for different reasons, for several reasons, which I think makes sense. But then at the same time, when you actually like engage with it, and also the algorithms they use, which are then visible, I suppose, also in your work, to a certain extent, and it's quite like, okay, is this real in a way?
That's I think I get that reaction. Also because the film is sort of, of course it's partly fictional. It's actors doing a text which is written by me, and it's not something that. So there's always this sort of this question, like to what extent is it really real? But I think I'm always sort of often after such an element that it's not about sort of a technology used in a regime somewhere far away, but it's actually sort of it's right in front of you.
Yes, it's very then tangible and hypothetical, but still
And it makes the inequality visible in such in a really black and white way. Of course, it's pinpointing where like the root of where it is. Also, even though it's in a percentage, where the inequality comes from, or some.
And how inequality, reproduces itself in a way.
Exactly. Because I think that one of the for what I've towards the end of making the film, I sort of realized that what happens, to phrase a little bit more precise, what happens in the criminal justice system when a judge says, like, and at that moment you made this and this decision and this is wrong and you made a mistake and we're going to sentence you for this and this long for that mistake, is that you sort of isolate. So there's a whole network of things that contributed to that moment in which that person made a mistake. But basically you cut the individual out of that network and you say, you're just responsible, it's just you. But what this algorithm is showing you is exactly this network. It's all these factors.
The
So
fact
if
that your neighbor is divorced.
well, it's divorced, but also if your neighborhood is a little bit run down, and if there's indeed something to the sort of the old broken window theory that happened, that sort of tells you something about when a window is broken, then the crime rates go up, etc., etc. Why is not also the woningsvereniging, how do you say that, the housing corporation sort of co-responsible for your crime, and or etc., etc. Name all these factors. If there's actually factors contributing to, that.
Yeah, like it's this almost like this joke I once made at a panel, but it was about basically when you live in a certain neighborhood and like the sideways are a bit messy, or like the street is not like straight or whatever, and someone is coming, or like the municipality is like fixing it, something is up. Because that's when gentrification starts, because that's basically starting with like making smooth roads, but that's exactly the broken window. But the inverse way of it. Like it's going up when they start to fix the road, they start like doing like putting new street furniture and all that stuff.
Yeah, and also the other way around,
And the other way around as well. If that's not happening, then something is
and maybe it's also not happening because all the responsibility is allocated to this individual. So you just blame the individual for doing that, and then you don't have to deal with the rest of it. Yeah.
It's also like policing your neighbors for like making sure their front yard is neat, kind of. I know people who do it.
I'm not sure.
Oh, you're not from suburbia. That's like exactly like the very basically where my parents live. That happens. Like people, like they shame each other for like not making sure their front yard is fine. Okay, and then because you don't live in Rotterdam, they say. But that's really
it's not Rotterdam here. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
because it's not. Because it's
that's factual.
And, and it has a quite an okay rating on the score, so apparently it makes sense.
Probably, yeah.
Sorry. That's why it's
there's also something in the data itself, because it's you're looking at living situations, but of course it's not taking in account if you lived there for 10 years or just moved in for a month, or drinking habits. It's not are you stressed for a month and you're drinking a lot, it's or like
of course,
and of course, so there's
not yet maybe
it's already so it's showing that looking at these data sets is already quite limited.
It's very problematic, because it's sort of the age-old representation question. Like you're not seeing what you're not looking at. There's always data missing.
Like
because how long are you drinking, and for long, and maybe you have a bigger liver, and
better resilience, or because you're doing it every day,
you can just endlessly start to sort of make the mesh finer and finer, and
but that's
where the divorce comes from, obviously.
Also drinking.
No.
No, but I mean, like it's more like the who puts let's say the weight. Where do you put the weight of like what's actually contributing to this factor? And
so like what factor weighs more than the other? That is done like that's completely automated.
But then it becomes,
because you just can endlessly sort of test. So we can. I'm not sure if we have the time to talk about this, but this is a way to test these. They're also thoroughly tested, these models. So what they do is they get, in this case, they work together with the probation service, and they just gather a couple of old cases, but not a couple of, like a very large data set, like 5. I'm not sure by heart, but I remember something like 5,000 old cases, but older, much older, from 2002 maybe. And then you predict, predict all the cases, and then because they are all the cases, you can also case by case look what really happened to a person, And then you can actually see sort of how predictable, how good what the prediction rate of this model is. Yeah, but it can never take into account the sort of and I think that the film is also about that, the effect of the prediction itself.
Yeah.
So if you tell somebody, well, the likelihood that you will recommit, what is the effect on an individual when you say that? That can never be part of the data set.
But you kind of, in the same vein, you also project basically the history on the future of someone.
Exactly.
Like the data set is like, historical.
Everybody, every teacher knows that. If you're telling not so good students, like, well, you've not been doing good the past year, so the likelihood that you will do, it's a horrible way to,
Exactly. And I think like on a larger scale, that also does, data kind of does it as well then. Because that's basically what you're saying with not what you're saying, what the algorithm is saying. Based on these factors, you're probably going to do really bad. So we're going to tell you like, it's probably going to be bad. And
it's basically,
It's quite
since
harsh.
free will is an illusion anyway, you're also taking away this illusion.
Great, Okay. So, to end on maybe on a positive note.
Sorry.
No, but like, is there anything you want to add on a positive note? Putting like all pressure on you?
After all this, I'm not sure. On a positive note, I'm not sure if it's all negative actually. Was it all negative?
To me, most of it sounds
It's
kind of negative.
bleak, but it's also...
Exactly. Maybe you like bleak.
I think it's just bleak.
No, but I think maybe like to try to end on the positive thing. No, but like this the awareness, and also like as you said, like it took you quite a while to find it, and although a lot of people are not aware of these things, and also if you talk about like a publication from '86. Not many people will probably know about it, especially within like a liberal discourse and also within the internet discourse, in a sense that like most things before 2005 or 2002, whatever, like they don't really exist because they're not on the internet, so it's hard to find them. Although probably this book is in the library, but then
surprisingly, it's not very well
so like it's hard to find. So I think this awareness and also taking into account the lessons from the U.S. because I think that's like one of the most horrible places in the world. In like, if you're not a millionaire, in a very good space, it's something you might not want to aim for or like go for. And like as a society, I mean, not you personally.
It's like, why me?
No, but you know, like this awareness is quite important, I think. And so in that sense, also the work I think is quite important. Also within the show, for me, it was one of the like main pieces that really related very well to the kind of the theme of the exhibition, like thinking about how systems have biases and how these biases kind of play out on different levels, but also like how they're very much biased, and the awareness about this bias is very important.
Yeah, and I think that what for me really was a positive thing is that I started really, maybe I'm repeating myself, but I was starting making this film really critical about these biases, but then you see that, we always talk about sort of how disruptive and etc. Disruptive is always a big word when but it can also disrupt other stuff we do not like so much. So
still disruptive.
So, with the circle, full circle.
That's an interesting. That's
it's
an interesting note. Because we have of course the work of Anna Rietler in the exhibition, who looks at these encyclopedia data from a long time ago, and that's now being used for machine learning systems, which can be quite problematic as well, of course. And that's basically because you'll lose a lot of data, but also now with Sammy, we had a conversation about like looking at systems that are like the VUC data that's now like the internet cable or the infrastructure of the internet, the deep sea cables, that it's in a way creating the same problems that, or the same systems.
Yeah, it's basically the same historical systems that are being either repeated or not even repeated, just continued or perpetuated, or how I say that. Like, how these things really...
That's also not too
like,
positive.
I know.
No, that's true.
No.
But we were almost there.
Yeah.
No, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's...
Yeah, it's right.
No, I think that's like a very important work you're doing. To put some pressure on you. No, but like, yeah, so maybe that's a good note, important word, awareness, and maybe the awareness will do something and change something.
Change something, yeah.
Yeah, because also, like thinking about this legacy in the discourse that you're addressing, not being so well known, but if it might be better known or more present, things might change.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe small. I think what's interesting of what I always find very appealing about being an artist is that you can just and I think that there's not that you can just knock on doors. Like for instance, I went to the probation service in the Netherlands a couple of times, and you can just they need days to figure out who you are and what you want, because are you a filmmaker, but is it going to be on television? And it's not that, and so there's a lot of confusion. But I think that on a very small scale, at these desks, having these conversations, there's also a small possibility to change, because normally we shouldn't underestimate sort of the debate there and the things that are being discussed. But such questions from an outsider can also do something. So that for me, that in that way, the sort of the work behind the curtains also sort of performs something that's not really visible, but that does something, I hope. Yeah.
I think that's the hope is a good note to end on, maybe.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks for this.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for joining us.
Yeah.